On the edge of a quiet village in the heart of the Yorkshire moors, there stood a crumbling stone cottage that had been abandoned for years. Locals whispered about the place, but few dared venture near it. They spoke of strange lights seen flickering through the gaps in the rotting shutters, and of eerie sounds that echoed across the moors when the wind was still. One autumn evening, as the fog rolled in thick from the hills, a young man named Thomas, tired of the rumors, decided to investigate. He had grown up in the village, hearing tales of the haunted cottage from his childhood, but he no longer believed in such things. Armed with nothing more than a lantern and a determined spirit, he set out. The moors were desolate at this time of year, with the heather turning a dull, lifeless brown. A bitter wind howled through the hills, rattling the branches of dead trees. Thomas trudged through the sodden ground, his boots sinking into the wet earth with each step. The distant hills seemed to shift under the weight of the mist, and even the quiet sound of his footsteps seemed muffled, as if the moors themselves were holding their breath. By the time he reached the cottage, the sun had long since disappeared behind the fog, leaving only a ghostly pale glow in the sky. The cottage loomed ahead, its roof caving in and its stone walls slick with damp. The door was ajar, as if inviting him in. Thomas hesitated, feeling the weight of the cold air pressing in around him. But the pull of curiosity overcame him. He stepped inside, the floorboards creaking under his weight. The inside was dark and musty, the air thick with the scent of mildew. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and a broken fireplace sat cold in the middle of the room. He moved deeper into the house, the faint, flickering light of his lantern casting long shadows across the walls. Suddenly, a low sound echoed from the far end of the room, a dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Thomas froze, his heart pounding. He swung the lantern around, but the light caught nothing. The sound stopped, but the silence that followed was even more unnerving. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind him. The lantern flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air grew colder, and the hairs on the back of Thomas's neck stood up. He turned toward the far corner of the room, where a figure now stood in the darkness. It was a woman, or something that had once been a woman. Her skin was pale and stretched tight over her bones, her hair hanging in wet, matted strands. Her eyes were wide and hollow, staring at him with an unsettling intensity. And in her hands, she held something. Long, twisted nails that scraped across the stone floor with every slow step she took toward him. Thomas backed away, but the room seemed to stretch, growing larger and more suffocating with every step. The woman was closer now, her breath ragged and unnatural, a gurgling sound rising in her throat. As she came nearer, the lantern flickered one last time and went out, plunging him into total darkness. A voice, weak but unmistakable, whispered in the pitch black, "You shouldn't have come." The next morning, the villagers found the cottage abandoned once again, but there was something different about the place. The air felt heavier, and the ground around the door was trampled, as if something or someone had struggled to get out. Thomas was never seen again. Some say they still hear his cries on the moors on cold, foggy nights. Others claim the shadow of a figure, lantern in hand, can be seen wandering near the cottage, searching endlessly for a way out. But no one dares go looking. The moors have claimed many before, and they seem to claim a little more every year.